Okay, so Bob Henderson. Okay, I'm going to read a few words off the website here about Bob. After serving for over 20 years as a coordinator of the editorial board, he is now working as a resource editor for Pathways, the Ontario Journal of Outdoor Education. Additionally, he has been resource editor for Nastawgan, which is our quarterly magazine for the Wilderness Canoe Association, since 2008. Bob's preliminary role as a resource editor is to generate submissions for publications. So he's like one of the people that goes after and looks for articles from our members and outside the club. After retiring from McMaster University in 2010, he has been doing field-based coursework with universities across the country, including the University of Alberta, Laurentian University, Brock University, McMaster University. He is also co-guide of a ski tour in Norway in partnership with the University of Edinburgh Masters of Education program. He recently published with co-editor Sean Blickensop, I hope I got that right, Paddle Pathways, Reflections from a Changing Landscape. And here's Bob.
Great. Thanks, Gary, and thanks for the invitation from the Wilderness Canoe Association to talk about an essay that a water essay that I'd written in the last issue of Nastawgan. It was sort of the genus of it was I was at the Wilderness Canoe Heritage Symposium, and I met Chuck Rose, who's a water scientist, and he was saying some things that I was thinking, and I've had sort of a bee in my bonnet about water issues for a long time, and it sort of spurred me on to write something on the strength of having a water scientist support. So I think what I'll do is just talk a little bit about my thoughts about water and canoe tripping and make sure that there's ample time for questions, because I'm really curious to know where people are at with the issue of water. Many people saying, I don't know, what is the issue with water? You know, like what is it at all? So I call the essay Water and Canoe Tripping a Messy, Fluid Affair to mean that there's lots of ways one can approach this. And I guess what I'll do is I'll go on my talk and then write down a question or two, and I'll make sure that there's time for questions. So, because if you, ask me lots of questions during the flow of things, I may not get to where I want to go. And it's probably coming up anyway. At least that's my thinking. So I guess I should put myself onto a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation that I put together here.
Okay.
There we go. So is everybody seeing that now?
It's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is my first slide, which I'm talking about. So now how come I can't get my second slide up? There's my second slide, so I can. So that was so the second thought around this talk was the water in Big Trout Lake hasn't changed, we have. And that's really the essence of my position on this. But I'm going to say at the outset that I'm not really speaking as a canoe tripper, first and foremost. I'm speaking as an outdoor educator. Thinking as a fellow canoe tripper with you folks, you might be going, well, why would he care what the hell I do? And who the hell is he to think that what I do is wrong or whatever? And that's not really where I'm coming from. I should be saying, well, what do I care what you do? But on the other hand, to be honest, I do kind of care. There's that great thought from Neil Everton at York University that said, it shouldn't have been, I think, therefore I am. It should have been, I care, therefore I am. So I kind of deeply care about canoe tripping and how we do it. But mostly I'm speaking from the perspective of an outdoor educator. And hence I'm wearing an outdoor education t-shirt here. And that has been my career. And that's where I'm feeling I'm best to talk from, because I've always worked from the assumption that if a canoe trip, if you're guiding a trip or a winter camping trip, what have you, and it's safe and it's fun, that's the sort of bar. And I feel like, man, that's a pretty low bar. Of course it's supposed to be safe. And of course it's supposed to be fun. don't we have educational objectives kind of beyond that? So for the purposes of this talk, I'm suggesting that a higher bar would be lofty stuff like, can we go on a trip and instill a kind of ambiance where nature is understood as home? Can people come to feel like they belong? Can nature be teacher? Can we cultivate within ourselves and within the culture ecological consciousness and make a better planet? So I know these are higher objectives than is it safe and is it fun? And as an educator, I think we need to set higher bars. And as a guide, I always worked from that perspective as well. Not so much because I wanted to impose it on people. It was because I was sort of seeing it, and it sort of I didn't force it on people. I just sort of noticed that it was part of the organic feel of the trip, particularly the long trips, because I went to a children's camp where I cut my teeth in Quetico with 4 36-day canoe trips, summer to summer. And that really set the stage for me. So, but the main thrust is this notion of the water hasn't changed, we have. When did water filters come into our lives? I'm 67 almost, and that means and my first canoe trip guiding was in 1973 at a children's camp. So I'll be 50 years guiding trips this year. I had 29 years at McMaster, where every year I guided a 9-day summer camp in the Chattahoochee River system northeast of Sudbury, and a 6-day winter camp, moving around a little bit, but most often in Algonquin Park. I have never used a water filter with any of those school trips. And I'm more inclined to use them because they come on personal trips, but I only use it when I feel the water is not pristine in some way. So I sort of thought, what happened? Why filters? What has changed? Big Trout Lake in the middle of Algonquin Park. Has the water changed? What's changed? And I sort of sometimes think maybe there's been a storification of nature, we need something to intervene between us and natural processes. And I kind of wonder where that's coming from. I'm only really talking about pristine water systems. I'm not talking about, near an industrial site or near an agricultural site, obviously, but it needs to be said. And it's a judgment call. So for example, I wouldn't drink the water in Canoe Lake unless I absolutely had to. And then I'd probably be in the middle of the lake and I would do it, but I wouldn't be crazy happy about doing that in a Canoe Lake in Algonquin Park. One lake south and Smoke Lake, and I have a cottage here and I drink the lake water all the time. So in the essay, I talk about Argo Lake, which is a beautiful lake in Quetico, and I talk about the Big Salmon River in the Yukon and the Clearwater River in northern Saskatchewan, just to get across the idea that this is a topic across the country. So during the 70s, 80s, and as far as I'm concerned, 90s to the present, if I'm concerned about water, I boil it. And as Chuck said, all you have to do is Chuck, the water scientist that I wrote the paper with, you just need to hit the boiling point, and you don't need to boil the water more than that. We carried iodine tablets on trips for really gnarly situations where we thought the water was mostly very tanniny, that sort of Coca-Cola water. Maybe we're in a creek system that we weren't, thinking the water was very good in. Somewhere around the 90s, people all started carrying water bottles, and we always had fresh water. If we were going through a little system where the water wasn't great. Chuck talks about the slurp and run, or the slurp and paddle on. Very unlikely you're going to get sick from water if you drank it once and then you slurp and move on. It's waterborne toxins tend to come with slurp and reslurp, or slurp and stay. The phenomena that actually we have in our communities where we live. It's also interesting that I'm also speaking about winter in my mind, because it's pretty hard to filter water in winter, and we would boil water. I had a friend who had tea morning, noon, and night, and he just had copious amounts of tea morning, noon, and night. And every noon hour, we would have a fire and bake a bannock, and he would have tea. And I was joining along, and it was his structure, and I was happy to follow along. And I always thought the tea was because he liked tea. He now lives in Australia. I never asked him, are you drinking this tea because you're concerned about water quality? And I think the answer is no. He liked he liked tea. But that's one way to go. And those were the things we used to do in those decades, the 70s, 80s, 90s. I don't really know when the filter started becoming so ubiquitous that I think a lot of people are afraid to drink water in Big Trout Lake without the filter. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. So, I'm trying to get to my next slide, and it's not going, but that doesn't faze me in the least. I don't know why.
You could use the down button on your keyboard. Okay, that might work.
I'm using the keyboard.
Or or you bail out.
Okay, maybe I have to just pull up. Stop sharing screen. Oh, it really doesn't matter. I could call my wife in and she'd sort of figure it out for me, I guess.
Sometimes it's over on the right side, right lower side.
I got it.
Phantom button.
Yeah, I put this slide in to say that in winter, I'm not sure what winter campers do about filtering. I've never been in a winter camp where we've carried filters. So let me just talk a little bit about to filter or not to filter. It depends. A lot of people talk about Giardia, and I think that's sort of a centerpiece. And from my looking into this, and from talking to water scientists, the highest rate of Giardia comes from fecal oral transmission, and the highest places where you're going to come across Giardia is in infant daycares. So that speaks to the idea of if Giardia does happen on a canoe trip, not negating that it can happen from foyted water rather, is its hygiene that's as likely to cause or more likely to cause a Giardia issue than not. I've had students that have said to me, I have an upset stomach and I've got Giardia. And I've gone to them, well, when did you get sick? Well, yesterday, but we're still on the canoe trip. Giardia takes 2 weeks for it to manifest itself, and then you need to send a stool sample to a lab to get a verdict of Giardia. I'm not saying you don't have an upset stomach. I'm just saying the chances of it being Giardia are next to none if you've got an upset stomach the next day. So the Giardia issue tends to be a little misleading or misguided, I guess. You need those. And by the way, I've had Giardia, so I'm. You can say, well, why would I listen to this guy? I had Giardia from a trip that I did coming down the Mississauga River, and I'm pretty confident that I got it from bad water outside of Blind River on Lake Huron. And that was a place where I think the water wasn't pristine, and I should have been boiling the water. I've also, traveling in Asia, got amoebic dysentery, and so I'm not unfamiliar with bugs, but I've never filtered my water in what I'm thinking of as pristine water systems. And I'll use Big Trout Lake as my example. And certainly never in winter. So water everywhere, but nearly a drop to drink without human intervention. Folks that are going to say, well, I don't get this, Bob. Just filter the water. Why not take a precaution? Take the extra precaution. I don't get it. And my answer is, why? If you agree it's a pristine system and there's next to nothing that's going to be a problem in this water, pause and think about what is lost. George Grant once called this term intimations of deprival. He was a Canadian philosopher, and he said, we're very good. And this was in the 60s. And so now this is a very pervasive comment when we think of humans and technology. We're very good at appreciating what we get with each piece of technology. And with the filtered water system, we get guaranteed, more or less, clean water. But we're very bad with all aspects of technology of considering what we've lost. And when we start going on trips and bring in more and more technology which intervene in the process of human nature connection. And I think drinking water from a lake is one of the great gifts. But to not do that because we have to filter it first seems like an imposition, and certainly an intervention on the natural experience. And I worry that what's engendered is a kind of don't trust nature, trust the store. Rather than nature being inherently good, nature becomes not to be trusted, trust the store. And whether we acknowledge it or not, there's a certain degree of alienation from the process and the alienation from where we're actually intending to go for a human nature kind of union. I think it's a significant piece what is lost. It's not insignificant. Now, there again, I'm coming to this from the perspective of an outdoor educator who has lofty aspirations for what I'm hoping can be achieved on the canoe trip. So that's really my position. There is something lost with the filter. And what I'd like to do now is just share a few quick stories and wrap up and see where people want to go with this. I think the first story I'm going to tell isn't a water story, but it really underscores this notion of how we're more and more removed from the natural world. We were at our summer camp. We spent a night in wall tents. And at the top of one of the wall tents, before we head on our trips, there was a sort of a dormant bat. So I don't think this bat ever moved. But for the night that they were in the tent, there was a bat in the roof of the wall tent. When we got back 9 days later, after having been on a canoe trip where there's bats flying around all the time around the campsites, one of the members of the trip told her parents about a bat. The parents went crazy because bats are instantly generating rabies, called the public health nurse. The public health nurse went nuts. And all of a sudden, all the people that were in the tent were contacted by the public health nurse to go and get a rabies shot, which is a honking big needle that they stick in your belly. And they came to me and said, "What gives, Bob? Should we do this?" And I went, "Oh, man, just be polite, be friendly, and don't go and do it." And maybe you disagree with that position, but I saw no danger from the bat. And what I saw was a fear of the natural world from someone who wasn't on a canoe trip. That same fear is embedded in the process of risk management plans. So a risk management story, and maybe we as individual trippers have our own sort of risk management structure. So on Lake Temagami, and this story isn't my own, a friend of mine came upon a trip on Lake Temagami, and it was a not-for-profit group, and they were 30 degrees for multiple days, and there was sort of an element of heat exhaustion in the group. She identified that they were not well, and she said, "Well, my goodness, what's going with you guys?" And I said, "Well, it says in our risk management plan that we're not allowed to drink water that isn't filtered, and one of our filters is pooched. So we just can't keep up with water. It's 30 degrees, and the kids are dehydrated, and they're not drinking." And I said, "Man, you guys just drink the water." There's a story out of the Boundary Waters Forum, which may be a little bit like the Wilderness Canoe Symposium. It's a group of regular trippers in the Boundary Waters, and there's a story about a group who, on a big stormy day, felt that they couldn't take water from the shoreline, so they felt they had to get out into the lake to get safe water. They were out of water, so they went out into the big waves because that's what they thought they had to do to be safe, and they dumped and drowned. And they only know this because they commented about this in their trip journals, which stayed on shore. Being a little bit dramatic, aren't I? But these are things that have happened. Maybe I'll finish with this one. So in the article that I wrote for Nastawgan, there's a picture of a whole bunch of kids. They're from Laurentian University, and we're drinking from a stream in an Iceland plateau. And the Icelandic guide who I was with said, "Well, let's stop for a drink." And the students went to their water bottles, and he said, no, let's drink the stream water. It's colder, it's fresher. And they were shocked, and they looked to me for advice. And I'm going, "Hey, I'm not from Iceland. I drink the water, but trust the guide." And they did, but you know, a lot of them commented in their journal how special it was. And I lied. I've got one more quick story. I've done some commercial guiding in the Arctic, and this is a picture from the Wind River here. And so near that watershed, this is a picture of students in Norway. And in Scandinavia, almost all the water comes from snow or comes from creeks that are active. So the mountain huts are built around a creek system, and everybody drinks the water from the lakes. I've never seen a filter in my experience, particularly in winter, in the Norwegian experience. But to go back to this slide, so picture you're on a canoe trip that's a guided trip. I'm the co-guide. The main guide, who works for the company more than me, fills a full-size blue water barrel, a tripping barrel, fills it with water with an industrial-like, pumping-like water filter. And then it's a hot day and he's tired from doing that. So he goes over to the river and he takes a big gulp of water because he's hot. Meanwhile, and he gets a nice cool glass of water from a northern mountain river. And while he's doing that, the water in the plastic is already starting to warm up that all the clients drink. And I said to him, well, what's with that, man? I mean, you're drinking the water from the river, so am I, but you're filling this. Well, it's in we gotta serve the clients water that's filtered, but none of us guides do. We all just drink the water. It seems like a bit of a sham to me, and it also seems like it's taking away that element of connectedness that seems to me to be why a lot of us are going. So that's sort of my position. I talked briefly about Norway, and there's not many filters in Norway from my experience. I've tried to address the Jardy issue very briefly. And my central point is, I think the bottom line is the water hasn't changed. We have. And I'm not thinking it's not a good thing. And with that, I close and I open it up for questions and see what people think.
All right.
So I'm stopped sharing. Yeah, there we go. I don't think I missed anything.
I'll start off with the first question. Do you think it's kind of a commercial driven thing, the people making filters?
I do believe that there's a kind of storification going on. People go to the store and they just buy all sorts of stuff. Mm-hmm. And some of it you really need, and a lot of it you don't need.
Yeah.
And I think the filter may be part of the storification of, which is kind of like a commodification of the experience of being in the out of doors. So yeah, I do think that's a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And back to the winter one. I mean, generally snow is distilled water, right? As long as it's not yellow or funny colors. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we always are boiling water, but we're not really boiling. We're just heating up the snow. And, but normally we're having hot beverages in the winter, you know. So I can envision, a filter is not going to work because any ceramic, if it freezes with water, and it's going to crack. So yeah, you can't do that. So it's strictly boiling or eating snow, you know.
Winter's an interesting conundrum because a lot of times you're in swamps. As you know, if you're putting up a wall tent, you don't want to be in the summer locations because they're exposed and windy. You want to be in the sheltered places, which tend to be, you know, deep into the bays or in the swampy areas. And I certainly have taken students for decades into Grape Lake, which is off of Smoke Lake, and down the Wisp Lake circuit, which is a little circuit out of Ragged. And there's small systems. And we've either boiled the water because people would want a hot drink, or I just thought the water was okay. And I guess what I want to say that's a bold statement, I will have had 50 years of guiding canoe trips. I don't know. I've never done math on how many or anything. To my knowledge, I haven't had a single person have any problems. Maybe I'm lucky. I'm just stating a fact.
Like William Commodore.
Yeah. It's Catherine here. Catherine. Hey, how you doing?
You guys are up in the Bancroft area,
the Madawaska River, and the gang's coming this weekend. And
good.
Wanapate kids and Jackie and Greg and Jeff, and my goodness. Yeah. Anyway, I was on a trip, Macmillan Pelly in the Yukon, got Jardy.
Yeah. You did, okay.
The rivers were so turbulent and active. The water wasn't clear, but also the beaver don't have a chance to be on those rivers, and they're on the little wee creeklets. So we were at our campsite or stopping for lunch, and there was this pristine little creek. My golly, lovely, lovely. And so we got our water and we thought, well, we don't need to filter that. And I drank it and carried on with the trip and whatever. And there were, I think, one or two others. And I'm a public health nurse, or was. Anyway, she said about 2 weeks later, I'm in a meeting at the health unit, and I'm thinking, I wonder if they'd mind if I just lay down on the floor. I can still hear, but I'm so tired, and then there's this horrible diarrhea, and the public health inspectors, they came to collect my sample, and yeah, I was positive. So really, I think, you've got some animal activity up these little creeks, and when you're out of province, sometimes you do stupid things. And I think that was a stupid thing. And if you say, well, was there anything else I ate, blah, blah, blah. One of my colleagues was on the same Air Canada flight back, and she was with her family. And a few of them ate the same thing I ate on Air Canada, and they were fine. So that's my Giardia story.
Yeah.
It was
keep in mind, remember that I did. Yeah, I've had Giardia myself, and it was pretty rough. Remember that and it's great that you're a public health nurse. You knew what to do. You went through the process. My response would be, I never negated that Giardia wasn't a possibility.
No, right, but it's the needle in the haystack. It's the needle in the haystack, and once you've had it, or you're with your family, you filter, because you don't want to find that needle in the haystack, especially if they're active. Yep. There's active beaver activity.
Yeah.
And so my response to that would be, it's a matter of a choice. And I choose, having also had Giardia, I choose to drink water from pristine systems. And I suppose you would argue I'm taking a chance. And I would argue I live with the joy of drinking water fresh.
Yeah.
And, that's just a difference of opinion.
My Giardia was worse than yours, but I slept for 48 hours. It was wonderful. It was like being an infant again.
Yeah. So I never want to say I negate experience. Yeah, I get it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I it's a possibility, absolutely. But my God, how many drinks do you have a day? You just tip your cup into the lake 5-6 times a day. You multiply that by a 20-day trip. You start all of a sudden.
Have you won any lotteries? That's the only lottery I've ever won in my life. But I don't buy tickets either.
Yeah. There's a lovely quote by a folk singer, Todd Snyder, if you're a fan, I don't know. And the quote is, listen, I'm not trying to change your mind about anything. I'm trying to ease my mind about everything. I'm not here to change anybody's mind. I'm here just to present a perspective. If I'm sitting on Big Trout Lake and I'm with a group, I'm drinking water.
Heck, it's
okay. Some people won't.
It's all okay. We love the outdoors, and we don't want to think of it as our enemy. I agree with you there.
Yeah, it's tricky. Let's see what else we've got by way of questions.
Testing.
Bob, just sort of your notion of a pristine system, is that it when you see it? In other words, if there's something ostensibly unwholesome about the water, then you deem it to be not pristine, or are there attributes, reference to farmland, or the Don River, you could sort of say there are specific features that are not, if they have any of those features or some combination of them, you'd say it's not a pristine body of water. I'm just wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on what causes you to put it in that bucket.
Yeah, absolutely. If I think I'm going to say pristine for me is lakes where there is no or very little cottaging, lodges, and it's a lake with campsites, flowing water on either side. It's not a stagnant lake. I forgot the endotrophic or something, and there's no industrial or agricultural hazards. Yeah, that's it. It's not really an elaborate answer. So that's why I used Big Trout Lake. I said I wouldn't drink from Canoe Lake, but I would drink from Smoke Lake one down, because the cottaging is minimal, and I trust that people have done the right things. And certainly when I get down to Ragged, the next system, it wouldn't even cross my mind not to drink the water from Ragged. So, and again, I've done that. That goes for winter and summer. So that might not be a great answer for you, Tom, because I don't have anything scientific to say there. It's sort of where the system has its natural integrity.
Yeah, I'm very much in sync with you. It was because I never had a choice. We were little kids. This goes back to the 1940s that I started canoeing. And but we were brought up with certain rules that you get your water more offshore in the middle of the lake. If you're going up a river and there's a pond and there's beaver lodges around, you avoid taking water from that spot. But I've paddled pretty much my whole life without ever getting sick and relying more on common sense than filters. But I'll use a filter if I'm in canoe country or I'm on a lake, I'm downstream of something industrial, going through farmland. But if I'm up in Algonquin Park or up in the Northwest Territories, I don't ever think about it. I'm with you. There are a few interesting places in the north, like on the Horton River, for example, particularly late in the season. There's a lot of silt in the water. So we would go out into the middle, which is tricky on the moving water, but we go out in the middle, use buckets and our smaller blue barrels, and bring water back, and then let the water settle for an hour. So we would do the same thing, but it wasn't polluted. We would just let the water settle, and if you tried to filter it, the filters would plug up. You wouldn't filter a bottle of water before the filter was plugged, but it was. Yeah,
I ran into that on the Wind. Yeah.
So we would leave.
I'm with you. I ran into that on the Wind River.
Yeah, this is on the Mountain River, but you'd let the water sit overnight, and you just get water off the top in the morning.
Yeah, it's interesting how chocolatey the Mountain River is, and then you get a river like the Wind River, and it's crazy clean that way. But I was in the Wind River in a flood, and when we got down to the Peel, it was pretty nasty. And in terms of water, our water filters clogged up. We had the water filter, and people thought we should use them because of the nature of the flooding water, and they clogged up in no time. So we let the water settle and boiled it. It's not like I'm trying to be a contrarian, like all water is safe and good. I am trying to bring in an element of what is a pristine system and go from there. And with my students, we tripped out of Lake Maskinage, northeast of Sudbury. So it's sort of my research experiment, if you will, because for 29 years, we never carried a filter, and we drank that water around that system of the Chattahoochee waterway. And as I said, to my knowledge, nobody got sick. If they did, I would have known, because we did those trips in September, and then they were in school with me for the next 4 months. So, based on that, I'm not about to start using a filter. Now, I might boil the water in a certain situation, as you said, where there's a load up of beaver dams or something, but I'd make those judgment calls in the field. What's interesting now is I've not guided that trip for 12 years. I'm wondering now if we've moved into a time when the students who were trusting me, I guess, but I don't know if they trust me now. they did then.
I'm wondering also, like just hygiene around the camp. You know, people might get sick because you're going to the bathroom, stuff like that. We have kind of a rule. We have like our kitchen barrel when we're doing like a regular trip, and there's always like a little kind of 2-liter bladder hanging on the tree with a little soap dispenser on a rope. So you're always supposed to wash your hands, you know, before preparing meals or cleaning dishes, stuff like that. I'm wondering if some of this stuff that people get sick on trips is nothing to do with the water. It's the hygiene of the actual participants of the trip. Because you know how things go, you know, you don't wash your hands all the time, maybe, you know? So I don't know if that's maybe
Yeah,
an
I think
aspect.
Well, I think that's it. I mean, I got from Chuck that the highest levels of Giardia come from infant daycare services.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a lot of shit flying around in those infant daycares.
Yeah, I agree.
And
So,
there's so many thousand millions of cysts of Giardia cysts compared to what would be in diluted water. So again, I'm not negating Giardia from water on canoe trips. I am just saying I agree that my first instinct when I do hear of Giardia is to go to camp hygiene, and it doesn't have to be your hygiene.
yeah.
Somebody
Well,
else's
it's like
hygiene.
I said, you got 8 to 10 people, 12 people, independent. You've got to kind of make that little rule. I know we have had people on canoe trips. Everybody's got their own technique of washing dishes, 2 stages, 3 stages. You know, so whatever the common denominator, I follow. But I can see not everybody's consistent washing their hands. You know, every so often you have to remind somebody because it's not a natural thing. Maybe, I don't know. Who knows? But maybe that's the aspect of what's happening.
Yeah, there's an interesting story out of Knowles, the National Outdoor Leadership School, on a winter trip, and they were in the habit of just looking behind them and grabbing snow and wiping their dishes with snow and calling it clean. And on a 20-day trip, people got sick midway through the trip, and that's what they attributed it to. Yeah. Not to proper washing of dishes. They got lazy or complacent, and it looked like those dishes were always clean, but they weren't. I wasn't on that trip. I only heard that story. It's a secondhand story. So,
what about the digestion systems of the participants? Like if somebody drinks only clean water from bottles that are bought in the supermarket, suddenly goes to the nature and gets sick. Like I was in India, I got Giardia once too. But you see, Indian kids drink the water of the Ganges. If I just put a drop on me, I'll die. But they just drink it. So the digestive system is more fit to it.
Yeah, I find what often makes people sick is just different water. Like we get used to the bacteria of our local water and what's treated, and you just go any place different. And I think it takes some time, what you were saying before, where it's just too much of the same water and you'll get affected. But when people were traveling, that's why travelers very often will drink, say, just drink Coke. We have Chinese students who are staying with us. They only drink boiled water because they know there's no such thing in their country as safe water. Even bottled water is not safe. They drink from the kettle 24 hours a day. Every student after student, we had maybe 20, 30 different students, all were the same. They drank boiled water. They drank kettle water all the time. Would never drink bottled tap water.
Yeah, I think there is a lot to be said for traveling and just getting a bug from something that wouldn't have affected a local person. Right. I have a story about that. I do a lot of traveling in Norway, and we were at a kind of an outdoor conference, and there were about 80 of us, and all our water was coming from a mountain stream. And there would have been sheep up in those hills, absolutely. And the organizer of the conference just sort of almost flippantly, I'm trying to capture how he did it. He sort of said, all right, now people are maybe wondering about water. We get our water from this stream. There's been a farm here for 1,000 years. There's been sheep up there for 1,000 years. Yeah, listen, you might get an upset stomach, day 1 or day 2 or 3, whatever, but, you'll get over it and it won't be a big deal. And mostly they were Europeans at the conference. And yeah, people thought that was crazy. But because he handled it in such a sort of casual, flippant way, to my knowledge, nobody had any position to challenge it. And maybe they were secretly heading off and boiling their water, but people just accepted his opinion. And I don't know of anybody that did have an upset stomach, but totally take the point. When you travel in new areas, that is a possibility. And I think people also have different, let's say, constitutions when it comes to these sorts of things. And some people are going to get an upset stomach and some people aren't. Where I have trouble with it is, and I'm not speaking to the woman that had Giardia at all, but is when somebody goes, oh, I've got an upset stomach. I'm on day 4 of a trip. I have Giardia. And then everybody goes, oh, she's got Giardia. Well, she doesn't have Giardia. She can't have Giardia.
When you have Giardia, you know you have it.
Yeah. So, and I have had that happen with students, and I've had to point out, well, are you taking Flagyl? And they don't know anything about Giardia. So I'm as an educator, I'm responding to a kind of alienation from nature and mistrust of nature, and trusting human intervention in the process. And that sort of scares me, because I don't think that's the route that we need to go on the planet. So, I'm getting now, really lofty in my thinking, but I try to react against the complication of human intervention and accept the complexity of human nature interaction more directly. I'm quoting a philosopher there, but so, but the point's well taken. People have different constitutions, if you will.
Also, you have to feel very privileged about the fact that you're living in Canada, which has pristine water, because, if you go to Europe, if you go to other countries, if you go further south, maybe even in North America, you will not find so much pristine water as you describe them, and as you can find them in Canada.
Right.
It's just...
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I actually say that in the article. I actually say, and I have been very privileged to take students to systems that I deem to be pristine water systems for my entire career. And that's important to me. I got interested in the North Forest Canoe Trail, which is a 740-mile route that goes from Old Forge in New York and goes up to Fort Kent in New Brunswick. It's an interesting canoe trip because it's through farm country and through towns. And, I got myself stuck on a really hot day on the Saranac Lakes, which have too much activity and too many towns. And I had to boil my water, but it was 30 degrees. I'm on a solo trip, and there I am. Oh God, I got to boil this water now, but I didn't carry a filter. I just boiled the water. So that's what you were talking to. That wasn't the pristine water course area that I was tripping in. And I was foolish. I would take a filter there now.
Can you just elaborate on the merits of filter, boiling, tablets, and any other systems, just when any of them might come into sort of optimal use?
Yeah, good question.
It is a good question, and I'm not the right guy to answer it. If you put that into the chat, and I don't even know if we have a chat, but if you were to email me, Tom, later, I would present that question to Chuck Rose. And I promise you, if Chuck gets back to me and I have your contact, I will get back to you. I'm, as I said, in my late 60s, and I grew up with drinking the water, tripping with camps in Temagami, Killarney, Algonquin, not drinking the water in the Saranac Lakes because of the town of Saranac Lake, which has 15,000 people, I think. And when we thought the water was bad, we were just told to put these iodine tablets in, and we did occasionally. When I was traveling in Nepal in the 80s, we used iodine tablets, and that was a common practice in the 80s in Nepal. My early days, I had friends that just used to drink tea all the time, like your Chinese students. So those are things that I've done. I have an inner hostility towards things from the store that I don't think I need. like let's say, I don't know, fish finder, stuff that I just feel like is unnecessary, like a popcorn maker or something that you take on a canoe trip, when you can just shake a pot, and I put the filter in that category.
Yeah.
But hey, listen, I work for some nonprofits, and they've got in their risk management plans, you can't drink any water unless it's filtered. But my whole point is, water hasn't changed, we have. And so it's a philosophical question, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think to answer a little bit Tom's question, I mean, I could add some input. I know when I'm hiking, weight's super important. So I've always gone the pristine tablet route, and you do have to wait 30 minutes, but if you work 2 bottles, you're not waiting. If the negative on that, you put nice, crisp, cold water, you wait 30 minutes, and now it's nice, crisp, hot water on the canoe trip. If you go the pump, you're carrying a weight of 1 pound, say, and you're pumping, but you got water within a minute or two of, it's nice and cold. Then some people have issues with the silt and all that sort of stuff. So, the tablet doesn't clear the sediment. The filter might, but it might plug also. So you're trading off all these things of instant water, or how much do you have to deplug, plug? There's a big push lately for the kind of the group gravity filters. What we've been doing is you get a gravity filter, you buy it, $80 or whatever it is, and you just put it on the group 1 trip, and it pays for itself for 2 trips, and you throw it away and you get a new one. And the group basically chipped in $10 each or whatever. You got your gravity filter for that outing. And then gravity filter is great because you just walk away and half an hour later there's 3 liters of water there. So that seems to be the route with groups lately. Just get 2 gravity filters on the go, and it's pretty well lots of water. I don't know if anybody else has any things. I know that we used to be pristine part A and B, and you mix it, you wait 5 minutes and you pour it in. And the same thing, you got to wait 30 minutes. That seemed a lot of hassle to do little bottles. But does anybody else have any comments on those systems?
Also about the boiling, like there is like pasteurizing, which you bring the water up to, like milk, which you usually do it, or you bring it up to 80 degrees. You don't need even to boil it. And then if you're boiling the water, for how long do you need to boil it in order to really make it clean to drink if it's not clean before? So there's different levels of what you call boiling, really, I guess.
Bob, you said the minute it boils, that's it. You're done. Everything's killed.
I learned that from, he would say, I mean, if you're in the middle of an algae bloom, which they have on Dixon Lake and Algonquin Park these days, that's another problem. Then you got to get, you shouldn't be there. You got to get out of there. That water is really polluted. But if you're anxious about your water and you're going to use a filter or you're going to boil, the water scientist that I wrote this paper with said, as long as the water comes to a boil, touches a boil, if you will, that takes care of the vast majority of things that could affect you, barring, a dead moose just upriver or any number of things.
Yeah. Can you talk about the Dixon Lake bloom? Because there was signs there when I went through about 5 years ago and said, do not drink the water. Everything looked fine. What actually is the algae bloom, and what can it do to you?
I don't know. That's another great question for Chuck. And we do say in the article, we're not dealing with that storyline here in this paper. I have been on Smoke Lake in Algonquin Park where the water smelled really, really fishy and tasted really fishy. And we boiled it. And then it still tasted fishy. And I was really concerned, came back. And the next time I was here, that was gone. No one could tell me what that phenomenon was.
You ate some vegetables and you have soup. If you bought it.
Yeah.
Listen, I really hope that, I've written this article, and I've talked about this with friends, but I've not done what I've just done here today. I guess the piece that I want to make clear is that I really do think that philosophically, when we can be drinking water and we really think it's safe to drink, this sort of goes back to Tom's notion of the pristine, or how I presented it, then we're really missing something. Like that shot on the Wind River, man, it's a hot day. Nothing's going to beat that water. Certainly the water you're drinking at home isn't even going to come close. So I'm just asking for kind of a common sense view. But as an outdoor educator, that's not happening, because risk management plans, you know how easy it is for a risk management writer to go, oh, yeah, the water has to be filtered. Or they might say, oh, yeah, no night tripping allowed. Well, what do you do if you're on the top end of Sturgeon Lake and you've got to get down to La Croix in Quetico in 3 days, and you've been windbound for 2 days on the upper Sturgeon Lake? Well, you got a night trip, but there's no portages. And so you night trip. If you don't night trip because your risk management plan says you can't, then you've got a 40-hour paddle, which is probably causing more danger to the kids than night tripping. But they've taken, the risk management plans take the responsibility out of the guide's realm and into a realm that isn't in context. So, but that's sort of another topic, but it's really easy for a risk management writer, however that is understood, to say, oh yeah, just filter the water. What's the big deal? What's the big deal is something is lost in that process. And it's a sham if we're doing it just because of risk management plan, or just because the filters are in stores.
Or ignorance.
That's what's that?
Or ignorance. I'm coming, by the way, from a place that the rule is that you can drink water only if you see where they're coming from the ground. That way you know that there is no animals or whatever that went through it. Now it's not clean. And when I did hiking in my youth, I used to carry a lot of water on my back from place to place, because there wasn't any other way to get fresh water.
Yeah. Now, Shahar, you're from Israel, I believe, right?
Correct.
Right.
So we used to go to the desert, and we used to carry 7 liters on our back. And, at nighttime, sometimes someone would have dropped us jerry cans of 20 liters or whatever. And we used to consume very little water, and we make a lot of tea and coffee, as you know by now. So I carry the kids with me all the time. That's just, I'm used to it.
I've got a little funny story.
In Australia. Go ahead.
Go ahead with the Australia story.
Well, I was just going to say, I've done a trip in central Tasmania, and there wasn't a lot of water, but what they call yabby holes. And people carry straws so that when the rainwater happens, they can drink from the puddles.
Yeah.
And that was a hard thing for me to wrap my head around. There wasn't enough water to boil, but we were thirsty, and we were using the yabby hole, the straws, to drink from these rainwater puddles. I found that, mentally challenging, but it's nothing like your story in the desert. I have no experience with desert work, and I would be intrigued to have to carry that much water. But I just thought the yabby hole was an interesting story on this topic. Yeah.
My story is on the Tim River. It was my wife and I and our friends from Ottawa, and they're married now. And we were on a mission when we were 20 something, and we were going to the Tim River and big trout and huge circuit. And this guy, Andrew, got sick on the Tim River. And it was a funny story because there was this moose peeing in the river, and he got violently sick that night. So like night 2 into the trip, and the next day he was incapacitated. Basically, I had to paddle his canoe with him in the bow, and tie 2 paddles together like a kayak, and the ladies took the other canoe. And we were committed. We were already like 2.5 days in or something. We had to finish the 2.5 days, and he was totally out of it. So we were double portage. So from that day till the next, 15 years, every time we tripped together, he would bring 20 liters of water in the canoe from home. This is a little before filters. They had iodine and all that bleach and stuff, but he would just bring fresh water from home. He got so sick, things were coming out every end, that he didn't want to do that again. So, but I think, and we all think, it was heat stroke because we're going hard. It was hot. He was the only one with no hat on and not drinking enough, probably. But people end up hurting themselves, and they really go off the deep end somewhere.
I wasn't there, and it's arrogant of me to say so, but it sounds like heat stroke to me.
Yeah, it does, because we all drank the same water, for the last 2 days.
I've been on a trip where somebody got heat stroke.
Yeah, and I
heat
believe
stroke's
in
pretty
those
rough.
days,
I have
we didn't filter. We just drank the water. These are in the late 70s, 80s kind of zone. Yeah, late 70s, early 80s, I would say.
In the article, I'm just looking at it now. When I say the water hasn't changed, we have. I put in square brackets, Big Trout Lake, just because it's in the middle of Algonquin, and it would be my example of a pristine system. But, it doesn't work for Israel. It doesn't work for Nepal. It doesn't work for an awful lot of the world. It probably doesn't work for Alabama, North Carolina, on the Adirondack Trail. I am speaking from the privilege of being a Canadian canoe tripper in Canadian Shield, primarily Canadian Shield waterways. Hey, Canadian Shield's 3/4 of the country, So that's that's important to say. This doesn't make sense. I'm going to Nepal for the month of October this year, and everything I'm saying makes no sense at all for traveling in Nepal.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I would say we're very lucky when you look at satellite pictures and you're planning a trip. There's lakes everywhere in Canada, right? You can almost look on the satellite picture and say, yeah, it must be a portage there. It's only 50 meters apart. And even if it isn't, you can bush crash through there, So you could just go anywhere.
Yeah, but if you're making up a rule for tripping, there should be one rule, and that is common sense will prevail at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need any other rule.
That's why the story. Yeah, Fred, that's why the story about the guide on was on the Keel River, who filled a big blue barrel full of water for the clients, and then was winded and a little bit hot, so we went over and had a big glass of water from the lake or from the river. That just seems like a ridiculous lack of common sense and a sham to me, and I'm in part reacting to that sham. But my worst fear is that people would go, what kind of arrogant guy would tell me how to drink water? And I'm not doing that. At least I hope I'm trying not to do that. What I am trying to do is say that we need to think about, with everything, every element of technology that we bring to our life, we need to think about, sure, what we gain from it, but also we need to think about what we've lost. And it is a privilege to be able to have that experience, I suppose, to actually be free to ponder that. But that becomes another talk. That becomes a talk about technology. And there's going to be a new book coming out next year called the International Handbook on Technology and Outdoor Education. And I've written a chapter with some friends in that book called Technological Creep, Cautionary Tales for Outdoor Educators. And, it's full of examples of technology sort of invading the trip in a way that offers efficiency, but takes away a kind of beneficial burden. For example, one company promoted Magic Pantry. They promoted to an outdoor program. You can buy these bag meals, like you foil meal, and it'll give you chili con carne or a Salisbury steak in whatever, 5 minutes it takes to boil the water. And this outdoor company bought thousands of bags of this stuff because they thought, wow, what efficiency. And I'm thinking there, oh my God, nobody's going to learn to cook. There's no community around the campfire. Like maybe I'm just too old school to but it just seemed like so much was lost with this technology of boiled meals. Also, it's expensive as all get out. So, I just felt, yeah, you know what? I gotta write an essay about help having people see that something is lost in the efficiency, and we've called it the beneficial burden.
Yeah, because
it's burdensome to go out.
Like you're talking about water filters, and our group never carries a stove. There's so much fuel in the woods, and we carry a grate, and we have matches, and we can get a fire going in the wettest of times in rain or whatever. That's just part of our group. And we were coming down the Bonaventure River once, and we found a canoe that was wrapped, and there was a couple going to the shore, and they were abandoning the trip, and they were going to hike out to the road. And so we said, well, I think we can get the canoe off that rock. Oh, well, they tried it and you can't do it. Well, let us take a chance. And so we got a pole, and we got a couple of ropes and pulleys. Thing popped off, and the canoe went back. The ABS canoe popped back into original shape. Oh, well, then they didn't have their food. I said, we can see your cooler on the other side. They've lost their chair. You don't need a chair. They've lost their stove. Well, they've lost the fuel bottles. We don't have a stove. We don't use fuel bottles. Why don't you just join our group? And we've got 2 days down to the end of the river, and just stay with our group. And, I think it was a real eye opener to them that they said, holy cow. And at lunch, we just put the food out and we shared it. And at supper, like there was no organization. People just had different skills and different interests, and things all got taken care of without any comment or people bossing each other. And we've traveled with those people several times since, and they, I think, found that they were worried about all sorts of things that they didn't need to worry about. And they took all sorts of things on the trip that they didn't need to take. And, I've been on trips where there's so many stoves and gas bottles and things going. And, our group would sort of say, like, none of that is necessary. We've never taken a stove, never had any backup. And we've never gone hungry. We've never gone cold. We can make soup at lunch, just find a place, make a fire. If you let that be your skill set, then that's what you learn to do. And you learn to where there's dry wood. You learn how to make a fire when you think everything is so wet, nothing will burn. There's stuff that will burn.
Yeah. The other thing people have problems with is
water bottles.
Yeah.
You get over technical. People are junkies. They're equipment junkies. They've got everything. They got, every kind of pot and pan and knife and tool, and they probably don't need half of that or any of it, really. If you go right back to the roots of where this all started, and the indigenous people that traveled by canoe, and how did they manage? What equipment did they have? And how far did they go, and how fast did they go? And it was pretty far and pretty fast with not very much.
Yeah, you trade knowledge to equipment, but it's also there is a saying of the travelers, like what you lost is something probably that you didn't need. You stay with what you really need, and it's minimal, but it's skills really, and those you don't lose. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of things that I would say to that is, with my educator hat on, again, I work for some nonprofits now that run summer tripping programs, and there's an awful lot of no axes and no saws. So kids are asked to go out into the forest and just essentially grab sticks. So I would know too, growing up with axes and tools, basically, from which to get firewood, that if there's a 3-day rain, I can get into a stump and get dry wood and not have too much trouble getting a fire going. That's a skill, Fred, that's being lost by virtue of the no axe rule. being affected by, well, 30 and under, I'd say.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about personal trips. I'm talking about institutional settings.
Yeah, I'm a
So
fan of
they're,
saws,
you know,
but not axes.
yeah.
We've had a friend in Ottawa a couple of years ago. He almost sliced off a piece of, well, I think he is sliced off a piece of his finger. Axes are very, very dangerous.
And worse than an axe is a hatchet. The worst is a hatchet.
Yeah.
And
worst, I agree with that. The worst is the hatchet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that the worst is the hatchet. Yeah, here's just a little fun, more of a joke, but a Swedish friend of mine who's very big on canoeing, and he's got a bias against kayaks, and I don't know why, and I don't have this bias, but he loves telling the story. What did the Tlingit do? They canoed down the river to get to the ocean, and they hit the ocean. They went, oh, we better buy sea kayaks. No, they use canoes. So it just, I've always thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
No, but a good rule or a good guideline with the axe is like one person is the person that uses the axe, that's skilled with it, knows how to use it, brings it. It's his axe, and it's not shared around, passed around. No rookie starts on the canoe trip. If you want to start in your backyard on a stump, but don't start on the canoe trip using an axe. But if you have a person, it's a one person tool, and that person should know how to use it and be responsible.
Well, it's like any tool.
Don't mess with an axe. Every divorceman will tell you so.
Yeah. Anyways, we're off subject here with axes from water.
Well, but it's the same business of tools and filters and, it's just, common sense.
Right. Okay. Does anybody else have any comments, questions? If not, we'll wrap her up, I guess.
There is a comment in the chat.
Oh, okay.
It's just a good anecdote from Kathy.
Oh, yes. Well, that's
great.
Okay, let me read it out.
I'll go to the
Kathy,
chat. Yeah. Okay.
Last summer, I paddled the Upper Missouri River National Monument and had to carry water for 150 miles. But after seeing the potential agricultural runoff, pesticides, etc., I accepted the need to do it. I live near the Northern Forest Canoe Trail in northern New Hampshire. I would never drink even filter water for any of that trail that goes to the agricultural lands. As in northern Vermont, the fertilizer, yikes. Yes. I mean, it's going back to what you said, Bob. It's not a pristine, waterway. It's going through.
I wouldn't either.
Farmlands. Yeah.
I'm with you, Kathy. I wouldn't either.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I just had to throw that out there because I've never canoed someplace where I couldn't carry water, and I haven't done the Northern Forest Canoe Trail. Well, not very much of it, but that's part of the reason I haven't done it, which is a poor excuse. But it's just the idea of carrying water. But now that I've done it, it's not such a big deal. But it's I just want to say I really appreciate the perspectives of what our gear, how technical it's gotten, and what that has. What we've given up, and it's really great to hear the discussion about that. So I really just have appreciated that perspective. It's really great.
I mean, we're spoiled rotten here. Like in essence, if we go, most of us live right around Lake Ontario and stuff like this. Bob's up about 2 hours or 2.5 hours north of us. But generally, if you go 1 hour north of Toronto, you're in cottage country, and generally the higher you go, the more pristine the water is, but we're really spoiled. I mean,
by the way, it's not only the water, it's also fish in the water and whatever. Like, I mean, if it's really water with pesticides or whatever, the fish is probably not good to eat. Heavy metals, whatever that they consume stays in their body, goes to your body, and so on and so forth. Yeah. In Israel, by the way, we have a huge problem with these materials that agricultural people use. All the vultures are gone because they want to get rid of the mice, the agricultural, the farmers, so they put those poisons and whatever, the mice eat it, then the vultures eat the mice, and the poison goes to them, and all the ecological system is gone. It's just a huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the fish, yeah, same.
So
I don't know if I would eat the fish. Yeah.
One of the things I was trying to do, and I've been doing this, like I've been inviting people that wrote, articles in Nastawgan to do a presentation, either a trip report or whatever. And so Bob agreed. We've also got the next one coming up in about a month. The lead article, the blood vein, Cindy is agreed to do a similar talk. And so the idea is, I'm trying to connect the Nastawgan. So you read the article, oh, it's great. But now bring the author and you can quiz them to death about, put-ins, takeouts, or whatever. And the same with Bob. So it's like you're trying to make like a more full body Nastawgan, basically, in essence. And Bob supports that. And like I said, Bob's the resource editor, one of them resource editors that helps Alex put the magazine together. So, thank you, Bob.
I have one point, like, is there a way, for example, to build a kit that you take a sample of the water, put whatever, I don't know, drops of, or think lakmus paper or whatever, and make sure that the water are drinkable or not? Like, not just to trust your instinct or whatever, but actually test the water easily. Take some kind of a kit with you to do it?
I'm not aware of such a thing. I am aware of being able to take the pH level of the water, but that's not going to affect your issues around water quality as much. So it's my instincts, relying on my instincts to talk about a non-instinct issue, but my instincts tell me that if there was such a creature that was effective and workable, it would be selling off the shelves like crazy at the Mountain Equipment Co-op. Yeah. And it would be one more thing to carry that I probably don't think I need, but it would be there. As the presenter, I thought of one funny story to close that is, as Fred said, it's all related. I was doing the Horton River, and I think we were 25 days, and the pilot that was flying us in said, "I'm really concerned about you guys." And I mean, I don't know, what are you concerned about? I said, "Well, you don't have any stuff." I mean, well, we're experiencing, and my answer was, well, we're from Ontario. We have a lot of portages. So we've learned to keep our stuff down, Well, you just don't have enough stuff. Like, where are your camp chairs? And he specifically said camp chairs. And we went, man, we don't have any camp chairs. But, we had a bug tent and, we had everything we needed. But we had so less than other people. So, I'm not above being proud. I took a certain degree of pride in that. But he was actually really anxious for us. Yeah. And I'm just picking up on a point that came earlier. And I suppose filters are a small part of that bigger question that remains a bit of a conundrum for me. I'm on the edge of my thinking, but I do feel like there's kind of a storification going on. Yeah, I think it intervenes in why we're actually going. Unless we are going just to test out equipment. But, who knows? Everybody can go for whatever reason they want. The educator in me thinks we should have goals that connect to the natural world, I guess. Anyway, I'm definitely spinning my wheels and talking in circles now. So I am super grateful for the opportunity. Thanks, Gary, for the invite, for the opportunity to share. And I love this idea of the full-bodied Nastawgan, and I hope to do things I can to help Alex and you promote that idea moving forward. And of course, none of it works unless people come on and participate. And I love the thought about the North Forest Canoe Trail, and it's just across the border, and yet I don't drink the water when I'm on it. It's such an interesting thing. But I head up to Kipwa, paddle the Des Moines or what have you, and no problem with the water. And so it's common sense.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Bob, if you can hold
You made
on
your
the
article
end.
dynamic with your presentation.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
we'll let everybody sign off, and then Bob, maybe Tom, you can hang on there, and we'll just recap it. All right. So see you, everybody, except
you.
Bob and Tom.
Take care, folks.
All right.